I'm going to say
Well, good evening, everyone.
Yeah,
thanks for coming to the October BeBOLD Bedford Speaker Series. I'm John Berfonski. I'm the Chief of Police here in Bedford. And welcome all. I know it's been a trying day for a lot of folks today with the storm and whatnot. Trees down, power outages. I know some people here are probably still without electricity, but the first responders in Bedford, DPW, are working hard to make sure that you get your power restored and your roads open up as soon as we can. Tonight, we are pleased to have Dr. Carolyn Morgan and Linda Haytayan here to talk about resiliency and children. We had talked about in a previous Bedford BeBOLD Speaker Series event about how anxiety affects young folks and everyone actually. And there's been some studies recently over the last couple of years, particularly one done in the State University of New York system, that draws the correlation between anxiety amongst teens and college students and the likelihood to become a substance abuser. So this is an important topic. This is something that all of us and you can use. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Carolyn Morgan and Linda Haytayan. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome everybody. Actually, I'll start with the storm because we're really good at sort of understanding. If you want to help your children, I'm going to repeat this very often tonight. The more you understand yourself, particularly how you deal with your emotions, the better off you're going to be. So think about this morning. I don't know about all of you, but Linda has a little one, I don't, but we were out walking, we were texting, emailing, are we going to have this talk, are we not going to have this talk? Linda's daughter was home, and I'm sure a lot of you went through similar things. And if you think about it, although that's not on a, you know, in the scheme of things, we all know that's not the worst that we all face. However, the way in which we all cope with those kinds of things actually is the beginning of teaching you what resilience is. So if you just think back for a minute, you don't have to share how you handled it, but the way in which you got through those changes and what you were going to do about work or your kids or your power outages, how you managed it is really what resilience is. So I am a mom and now a grandmother, and I had been practicing clinical psychology for over 25 years. And what brought me, and also now a coach in resilience, and what brought me to this is really witnessing in my practice a lot of changes that have been happening in our young adults and in how we're parenting. And I'm sure you've all heard this before, but the era of everybody gets a trophy and focusing solely on self-esteem has not been effective. Not that self-esteem isn't important, but making that the sole focus of having our kids be happy all the time has really led to a lot of problems. So I really very much welcome being here because I know that the mission of BeBOLD is a little bit different than the other places we've spoken, and that the focus is on how to help your children be less vulnerable to drugs, alcohol, substance abuse. And in fact, it is true that depression and anxiety really do increase the vulnerability for our young people. And I think by the end of this evening, you're going to have more of an understanding about that association. So many of you, I'm sure, have heard of what a dual diagnosis is, and this is what was being referred to earlier, is that many people that we see that are dependent on drugs or alcohol or overusing oftentimes are individuals that really have just started to use marijuana or drink or opiates, and maybe the first time they do that, it's recreational, they're experimenting, but if what they experience, and you know there's a lot of information there about how the brain is impacted now, is beyond that, and they're going to get a relief from those very uncomfortable feelings, and right away you have more of a chance of that becoming a problem. So some of the statistics, and these might be a little bit outdated that we're not proud of, are the following. New Hampshire has a higher than average rate of alcohol abuse, 9.09% compared to 7.759 of the population as a whole. New Hampshire ranks 3rd in the nation for adult binge drinking, and it's 16th among high school students in the nation. And New Hampshire teens rank 1st in the use of marijuana. So again, a lot of concern about that, and we're all so aware of the opiate crisis. And one thing that we're hoping to eventually do with our with our presentations and reaching out to young people is that if you really pay attention to how the media is covering the epidemic, particularly with opiates, a lot of the focus is more providers, more treatment centers, more more people that are able to administer medications when somebody is found to be in trouble. All of these factors, of course, are important, but at the end of the day, you really don't hear people talking very much about the vulnerability factor. Why is it that we're in this situation? And that has been on my mind actually for a while, and this has sort of helped bring everything for me into more of a focus. So, I had a patient actually recently come to me very concerned because although her child is doing very well, her child's friend who lives in Massachusetts had seemingly out of the blue started to become very depressed, ended up doing self-harming behaviors, and was admitted into a psychiatric hospital. And my patient asked me the question, and she's a really good mom, but always is believing that then, at any moment this child is going to start really showing big signs of mental health issues. And she asked me, how can I be certain? And the bottom line is we can't be certain. But I look at what Linda and I are doing, and our colleague Betty Panagoulis, who isn't here this evening, is that just like all of you, I'm sure, do everything you can to increase your child's physical well-being, regular doctor's appointments, going to the dentist, wearing a helmet, a seatbelt, all of these factors are the best you can do. But having said that, could that child still end up being ill? Yes. So although growing resilience, and we'll get into what that's about very shortly, can make a difference, of course there are no guarantees. But to do nothing at all and to sit back is also very problematic. So most of us, I'm sure all of you, or most of you, I see some young people here, have had traumatic or difficult things that you've had to deal with in your life. And if we had the time and we went around, you would be able to tell me what were the factors that got you through that. You'd be able to think back on what traits within yourself helped you get through that difficult time. It could have been a death of a loved one, challenging problems with a child, a business folding, going under. It could be so many things. And at the end of the day, whether nobody wants to have to deal with these, but we all do have to cope one way or another. So you all have been coping, and your children will find ways of coping, but they're going to learn how to cope with you as their role model. So one very important factor of growing resilience, it also increases our emotional IQ. And I'm sure many of you have heard this, but emotional IQ is a far better predictor of our children being successful than anything else. Grade point average, SAT scores, AP classes, all of this stuff we're running around and trying to give to our kids. Emotional IQ, without any doubt, is the best prognostic factor for a child flourishing and doing well, which is kind of amazing when you think about that. So a couple of the things I'm seeing more and more in my practice are parents coming in and their children really not flourishing. They've often done fairly well in high school, or they may even be having trouble in high school. But now they're in college, and that first year, unfortunately, a lot of kids are really struggling, and they're not doing well, and they're coming home. And let me tell you, once that child comes home, it is not easy to get them back up on their feet. So more and more parents are coming into people like myself, obviously wanting help and trying to figure out what to do. So I'm going to read a quote. Martin Seligman is one of the people that's really done the most work, I think, credible work and research on resiliency. And at the back, you have a book list that you can take with you, a bibliography. And he says, America has seen 30 years of a concerted effort to bolster the self-esteem of its kids. This movement would be justified if it worked and self-esteem were on the rise. But something striking has happened to the self-esteem of American children during the era of raising our children to feel good. They have never been more depressed. So that's a somber thought. And but we're hopeful because I personally already see a shift beginning to happen. There's a lot more research now on positive psychology. In my field, for a very long time, the focus has been on what's wrong with the person, what's their diagnosis. And there is now a shift where you actually are really doing, well, not everybody is, but more people are looking at how did this person who's in my office with whatever problem they have, how is it that they've done as well as they've done? So it's a very big shift even within mental health counseling, and I think it's going to be a very positive one. So now I'm going to introduce Linda.
Thank you, Carolyn. My name is Linda Haytayan, and I'd like to thank the board, the BeBOLD board, for inviting us here tonight. What you guys do is just amazing, and it's wonderful to be here, and I thank you for that. I am a yoga teacher, I am a broker, I am a coach, and I'm a mom, and now I'm a new step-grandmom, and I'm also now a resiliency coach. And I appreciate everyone making the effort to get here. As the chief said, it was probably a little stressful getting out the door, and as Carolyn mentioned, it was probably more stressful figuring out your day without electricity, without school, where you're going to put the kids, are you going to stay home from work, or you're not going to stay home. So I would like to, right now, I'm a yoga teacher, but don't get scared. I'm not going to have you do a headstand, or I'm not going to have you go into a full back bend, so don't worry. I'm going to do a little mindful breathing exercise with you guys. If you don't want to participate, you don't have to. So if you have something on your lap, you may want to put it down by your feet or put it next to you. Want to get a little comfortable in your chair. You can do this with your eyes closed, or they can be open. It's whatever you're comfortable with. So just sort of organically breathe right now while I am guiding you through some mindful breaths. So you're seated in the chair. Right now I want you to bring your attention to the way you feel. Just kind of do a little check-in with yourself. You know, maybe you're feeling a little anxious, or maybe not, or happy to be here, happy to leave. Just do a little check-in. And while you're seated, I want you to draw attention right now to your feet on the ground. Feel your feet anchored onto the ground. Feel your legs coming up through your sits bones that have you anchored on your chair. So you're really anchored on your chair right now. So while you're breathing, if you can, bring your belly button to your spine. Have your sternum up, and your shoulders, you can shrug them up and back in a breath. And do that again. Shrug them up, inhale, and back. So on a count of 6, and I will walk you through this. You can have your eyes open or closed, doesn't matter. On an inhale, I want you to take a deep breath through your nose. If you're counting to 6 in your head, that would be fine. I want you to fill the belly first. Bring that breath into your belly. Then fill your chest, and now fill your throat. So if you got into a count of 6, I want you to hold it for a count of 4. Now I want you to slowly exhale through your mouth. You're emptying the throat, you're emptying the chest, and now you're emptying the belly. You can make a little noise doing this too. Don't be shy. Let's do that again. Once again, feel the earth beneath your feet, the strength of your body supporting yourself on the chair, shoulders up and back, your head nicely centered in between your shoulders, belly button to spine, sternum up. On an inhale, on a count of 6, fill the belly, fill the chest, fill the throat. Hold for 4. Now slowly empty the throat, empty the chest, and empty the belly. You can flutter open your eyes. And just take a little mental check-in now, how you feel. Did that help you? Do you feel a little grounded? Do you feel a little more relaxed? This is one of many exercises in mindfulness and regulating our system. And this is something we teach in our groups. And the breath is something you can always have with you. So if you're feeling a little anxious, sometimes, we talk about the tools in your tool belt. You may not have time to call a friend, you may not have time to journal, but you always will have your breath. Your breath is with you. So remember, in those stressful situations, bring that breath all the way into the belly, fill the chest, fill the throat, hold, and exhale. Good job, by the way. Now we'll do the headstands. I'm kidding. So I'd like to take this opportunity to define resilience. What is resilience? Carolyn mentioned a small example, but there's a big range. Resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, workplace and financial stressors. Basically means bouncing back from difficult experiences. Resilience is what allows us to bounce back or forward, we won't get into that right now, from change, adversity, and trauma. So there are internal factors, we've written some up on the board, that you can grow, like working out, like working a muscle. You can build a muscle, you can build strength. And some of those, although we don't have a lot of time, we've given many talks, and we usually will have an hour, hour and a half. So we're kind of condensing this to a Reader's Digest version. We're not going to be able to go through everything, unfortunately, but we'll be available for question and answers after. There are internal factors, emotional regulation, a growth mindset, impulse control, responsibility, grit, which is having the passion and perseverance, character strength like kindness, empathy, generosity. There are also external factors like financial resources, faith, connection to a positive role model, and social groups. So they're the ones that we can control and then the ones we cannot control. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Morgan.
So I'm going to talk about emotional regulation, but before I do that, at the very bottom here, I want to just point out that it's a simplistic model, but it's one that works, which is that inevitably there's going to be an event in life. But an event doesn't have to be like we lost our power. It can also be a thought. But there's going to be an event that's going to lead to certain thoughts because we're always interpreting what's happening to us. And then those interpretations or thoughts are going to promote certain emotions and feelings. And ultimately, that's going to lead most of the time to some kind of a behavior or consequence. In my opinion, a lot of the books and the stuff that's geared towards helping parents is aimed at behavior. How do you give kids consequences? How do you get them to follow rules? And if they don't, what do you do? And those, sticker behavior mod charts. Not that that's a bad thing, but I don't think that I think it leaves something to be desired. So then on the other hand, I think a lot of parents, I'm sure none of you, are trying too hard to micromanage the events, right? Because if you want your child to be happy, not feel disappointed, actually Linda's daughter, who's on a team, had a great example of this the other day. One of her she's 12, right,
12,
Bella?
yeah.
Yeah, one of her teammates wasn't played in a part of a tournament. And this kid was very upset, cried a lot. I thought the parents, from what I heard, did a really nice job. But a lot of times what happens there is you have parents rushing in, and this is really happening so much now. They're rushing in, their hearts are in the right place, and they're trying to fix things. But at the end of the day, if we're always doing that and trying to just offset any possible problems for our kids, they will not be prepared when they're 18 years old and they're out of the house. So that doesn't mean there aren't times that we have to step in, of course. But believe me, a lot of times parents step in when it's not needed. And if you want kind of a shock, just Google, what did I look at? Parents, because I've been trying to write. So parents assaulting or attacking teachers and coaches, something like that. It was crazy how many stories there were. So what growing resilience is about is really focusing on thoughts and emotions. And right now I'm going to talk a lot about emotions. And what I did is I prepared a little handout the last minute. It's like bullet points. So the bad news is, like everything else that we do, our kids are going to follow our lead. We're their role model when it comes to emotions. So I'm going to start with talking a little bit about what is emotional regulation, because at the end of the day, if a parent is overreacting or negative about a lot of things, or quickly blowing up in a situation or whatever, their kids are going to learn from that. So the first part of what I'm going to talk about is really what is emotional regulation. And it's the capacity to be present with whatever we're experiencing and then be able to cope with it effectively. So actually I gave away all of my things. All my little, can I have one? Thank you. So I wanted to go along with you guys. So just some things there's a lot of mythology about emotions. I've been doing a kind of therapy with people for a lot of years that's mindfulness based. So Linda's exercise gave you a little bit of what mindfulness is, but mindfulness is an incredibly powerful tool. And basically what it allows us to do, it allows us to come present with whatever we're feeling without judgment. Sounds easy, right? Well, if your child comes home and you thought they were doing really well in English, and you open their backpack and there's, 3 papers or quizzes in there with F's, what are you going to feel? Frustration. Yep. What else? Anger. Yep. Now dig a little deeper. What do you think you're really feeling underneath all that, huh? Fear. Absolutely. Fear, and a lot of times disappointment. So what happens is we're faced with something like that with our children and we get hijacked. And hijacked is a good term for what we're teaching, because your kids will get hijacked. And if you learn how to manage your own emotions a little more effectively, you'll be in a much better place to help them. So, emotions are part of life. Our kids have to be prepared. I'm sure we would all love our kids to face nothing but happy times, but it's not going to happen. Emotions can give us valuable information about ourselves. So in fact, the more you understand how you deal with your feelings, the more self-awareness you have, which then translates into emotional intelligence. We have the right to our emotions. There are no good or bad emotions. There are definitely ones we would rather all feel, but they're all important. Emotions are not the problem, but what is important is how we express them. And most of us are wired in a similar way. We experience feelings such as sadness, frustration, loneliness, anxiety, joy, excitement, etc. So, it can be daunting, for sure, to think about how much we're modeling that for our kids. So what are some of the ways in which you can help yourself and therefore your household? Well, Linda gave one with the breath, which we always have with us. But just think for a moment yourself about what things you do to cope with your emotions when they get to be a little bit intense. Anybody willing to share? What do you do? What kinds of things do you go to? How do you get through that?
I yell.
You yell?
I go out and I scream.
So you're just yelling in the car or something?
My own time out, I'm like, it depends. You can't do it in a room full of people.
Okay, what other ways?
Exercise.
Exercise? Yep, what else?
I pray for strength.
Okay.
A lot of
What else, guys? You're all doing it. You're all doing different things. What else do you do?
Talk with a friend.
Yep, talk with a friend. So there are very constructive things that we want in our own toolbox. And a lot of times we're doing them, but we never connect the dots. We never, it's easy when we say, oh, I was feeling a little bit blue the other day, so I called Linda and asked if we could go for a walk. And then I say, wow, that really helped. But you really want to connect the dots, because the things that we do in our lives, it could be quilting, yoga, exercise, cutting trees, being with our pets, really anything like that. You want to pay attention, sort of like what Linda did, you know, take a snapshot of yourself before and after. And those are the things that you really want to cultivate. You can't make an excuse that you don't have time to do these things, because you have to find ways to take good care of yourself. So it's like what they say on the airplane, you know, you have to give yourself oxygen before you're going to be able to do it for your kids. So I'm going to share an example of something that you may all have experienced in your life. If you're not connecting with how well you're doing at the end of the day, and you come home and you find out that, I don't know, it's 8 o'clock at night and your kid forgot to tell you that they need something from Michael's or AC Moore, right? Your capacity to deal with that is going to very much be how connected you are with yourself. So in my hallway at home, when my kids were both at home, there was an area that had backpacks and lunch boxes, and I would come in and be like, you know, walking over them. If I was in a good mood, I would just say, come on guys, you got to get this stuff up into your room. If I was tired or hungry or stressed, well, it was not a pretty picture. And somewhere along the way, I figured out that they were not changing, but I was changing. So a very important thing is to sort of do a check-in with yourself. How are you doing? Without judgment, because you might say, I am really not doing well. I just got very bad news at work. I'm really worried about it. It's sitting in my heart. I don't know how to tell my spouse, whatever. You might be going through all of that. You're still better off to make that connection, because that puts us at very high risk if we don't make the connection in how we react to our children. So emotional regulation is something, honestly, I teach now a lot at work, and you could spend 12 weeks just on that. So it's very important. And mindfulness training, I'll tell you, changed my life personally. I was a therapist for a lot of years. Just by chance learned this therapy called dialectical behavioral therapy that's mindfulness based. And that was 20 years ago. And we were sort of like, what is this mindfulness? My colleague and I, Betty Panagoulis, who's not here tonight, and we started to do groups. And then very rapidly we discovered that this worked so well with all of our patients. And then in my own life, like, I never knew how I was not mindful till I had to learn this. And to this day I have relapses, but it really is a way to be more centered in your life, because once you know what you feel, even if it's very intense, like I feel very sad or I'm feeling very lonely, you're in a much better position to be able to figure out what you're going to do about that. So mindfulness takes a lot of practice, I'm not going to lie, but it's a very powerful tool. And it really teaches us to have the capacity to observe what we're feeling, or also what are our thoughts, which Linda's going to talk to now, and be able to manage it in a way that's effective. Because a lot of times when we feel something very intensely, it feels like somebody gave us a hot potato and we just want to get rid of it as quickly as possible. So if somebody hurts my feelings, how am I going to get rid of that feeling? If I'm disappointed, or my spouse, did something I'm not happy with, like, when you have that feeling, you want to get rid of it. And that causes us to be potentially very reactive. So it can be hard work for parents to teach their kids, particularly if they themselves did not grow up in a family where emotions were taught effectively, which, that's generational, that varies a lot in culture, in ethnicity. There are a lot of factors that come into that, and many of us did not get raised in families where emotions were dealt with very effectively. So then it's even harder, because you may be parenting the way you were parented, or you may say, one thing I know is my dad did a lot of, yelling and screaming, and I'm not going to do that. Okay, but what are you going to do when you're upset? So you have to kind of learn how you're going to manage those moments in time. So very important for our kids. There's actually Dan Siegel on the bibliography. There's 2 books. I think I gave 2 or 3 books. One is No Drama Discipline, and the other one is The Whole Brain Child. They're excellent resources for actual techniques to help your child based on the age. But you can actually teach my grandchild, my granddaughter's 2, and my daughter's been teaching her to take a breath, which at this point is kind of like, you know, but with time, she's going to be able to use that as one of her tools along with other things. So, as parents, very important that we do acknowledge and validate the feelings that we see in our kids. So if your child comes home and they're very sad or disappointed because they were not invited to somebody's birthday party, again, a pretty typical scenario, or they weren't played in a game, that child has the right to feel sad or disappointed. However, what are you going to do to get them through that? Yes, you acknowledge, you validate, I understand that you're sad, I don't blame you for that. If it's a situation that maybe they can do something about, you can promote them being an advocate. You know, have you thought about talking to your coach? Or what are your thoughts? So much of the time parents say, well, that's it. I'm calling the coach, or I'm calling your teacher. There was a cartoon years ago in the New Yorker. No, that's not true. It was not that long ago, but it's about something from a long time ago, where they had a parent, a teacher, and a child sitting together. And the child has failed all their courses, you know, in the report card. That scenario back in the 1950s was the parent saying to the child, what are you going to do about that? Now, where we are, same scenario, you have the parent saying to the teacher, what are you going to do about that? There's been a very big shift. So, helping our kids strategize and come up with solutions to their own problems builds their sense of competence. Having a child come home and say, you know what, Mom? I was a little bit nervous, but I did go talk to the teacher about why I got such a low grade on my English essay. And she told me this, that, or the other thing. That child, that's a gift that we've given them, because that's what builds confidence. You cannot give a kid self-esteem by telling them that everything they do is great and wonderful. They have to earn it. So, okay, so I'm going to turn it back to you. Linda's going to talk about growth versus fixed mindset.
So as I mentioned earlier, that we have some internal factors that we can work on and build and grow. And one of them is a growth mindset. In fact, I'll tell a quick story off of what Carolyn was mentioning. My daughter is in the 7th grade, and she, you know, is used to being a fairly good athlete and making teams and playing. I'm going to hand these out too. And I wanted her to do something involved in the middle school. And I told her, you can run track. I know you're a good runner, or you can try field hockey. You've never played field hockey before. Hemmed and hawed. So finally she decided the day before school she was going to try field hockey. And I've coached her for years. I coached lacrosse, and she's used to having Mom as a coach. And she didn't get a lot of playing time. She's a decent athlete, and this goes back to grit. We won't bother getting into grit right now, but it's such a big passion of mine, actually, when we do other talks. And she was unhappy. She, oh, Mommy, I don't want to go to practice. The coach doesn't like me. And I said to her, honey, this is your choice. You can't quit. If you want to go advocate for yourself and go talk to the coach in a respectful way, then, you know, and ask her, what can I do to get more playing time? Is there something I can work on at home? I said, I'm not emailing her. I'm not calling her. You know, this is you're new at this, so don't expect to be a starter. Don't expect to be really good all at once. So that's just a little example. I mean, you know, I don't always do the right thing like everybody else, but I was proud of myself for that one. So, fix versus growth. I will draw another example to when I coach kids. So I coach now. I've done a lot of coaching, but now I'm coaching at the middle school level. And I like to introduce some advanced techniques. They're called stick tricks, and they don't really know how to do them, and they're kind of difficult. There are these moves with a ball and your stick, and you know, you got to move the stick around and, you know, twirl it behind your back. And I expect it to be difficult for the kids. And in the beginning, I heard, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. So I stopped everybody in their tracks. And anytime anyone said that I can't do this, they had to chant, this is difficult, but with practice and effort, I'm going to get this. And it began to be a joke, actually, but it worked. Because then kids would be like, oh, God, look at me, look behind the back, I can do it, I can do it. So that's just a small example of fixed versus growth. Another one would be, I'll never be smart enough or as clever as him or her. I don't know if your kids have come home maybe with a bad grade and compare themselves to another child in their class. Oh, I can't, I'm just dumb. My daughter says this a lot. But the growth mindset would be, I'm going to figure out what he or she does, and I'm going to try to model that. So I think we can all think of a time when negative thoughts have hijacked us and limited our actions. I know for me, for example, when I'm going to go teach a yoga class, and I've never been to the studio, if I'm subbing, I have that, I call it the ticker tape in our head. Oh gosh, what if they don't like me? What if, they don't like my voice? And maybe they don't like my music. Where am I going to put my mat? Is this outfit okay? Is the top too tight? And part of me feels that, where's the exit door? That fight or flight. Maybe I'll just leave. Of course, I'm old enough and mature enough, I'm not going to leave. I was hired to do a class. But the thoughts definitely go through my mind, and I have to check in with myself and say, okay, these are real thoughts, but I can get through this because I've done this before and I know I'm okay at it. So all those thoughts are normal and okay. We can teach our children how to manage those thoughts and not let them, we've used this word over and over again, hijack their actions and their decisions. We can teach them to be an observer of their thoughts, and that self-talk is the key in shifting your mindset and settling in towards a goal or an action. Parents will often spin their own interpretation on what brings a child to say, I have a stomach ache, my head hurts. As Carolyn mentioned, we have an event. Like maybe that child didn't get invited to a birthday party, or maybe, kids are saying something about their grades in school. It can be anything. And then they have these thoughts or emotions and then a behavior. I don't want to go, don't make me go. A child's actions could be a simple manifestation of 3 thoughts that brought them to an uncomfortable action that may not be effective for their lives. This is where we can practice our growth versus fixed mindset. We can help the children rephrase or reframe something. So many of you may be sitting here, thinking of examples, or maybe even thinking of, well, I don't have a child like that. She or he excels in soccer or lacrosse, or is on the robotics team. They brought home these awards, or maybe, they're great at the piano. But what Carolyn and I and Betty try to teach during our coaching is that to pick something, even as a family, and Carolyn mentioned modeling, so we're tying this all back together, modeling, like maybe everyone planting a garden. I mean, I'm a terrible gardener, and it's always an effort, but I try it, I do it every year, and I usually try to have my daughter join me, planting a garden together, maybe going on a hike, maybe training for like a 5K together as a family. I'm using everything physical, because who said they handle their stress by working out? That's me. Or doing a difficult puzzle together, something to get a little uncomfortable to get comfortable. That's what I tell my kids too when I coach them. You can't automatically step on the field and be great and fantastic at what you do. You always have to get a little uncomfortable to get comfortable, and then get a little uncomfortable again, because life is always changing, right? The kids are little, then they go up from elementary to middle school to high school, and then they leave us. And then we have to handle all that as well. So, swing it back over to Carolyn.
Well, so we're going to actually ask questions in a second, but I wanted to just say that when we talked, I think it was, we talked at the Y in Goffstown. After the talk, one of the staff members came to us and said that in a very tangible way, something that she had noticed, she works in the camp there in the summer, that for years kids loved to do archery. Like they would have kids they couldn't take them all because everybody wanted to do archery. And now they're having a very hard time having kids do archery because they approach it, it's so new to them, and they might not do a good job. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So that whole thing about even if your kid is doing very well in certain areas, you need to always be thinking about how to increase their level of not expertise, it's just exposure to new and different things, because that is very important. I'll just end on this note, but a new patient actually. The dad had called me, introduced this girl, said over and over again that she was beautiful inside and out and very, very happy. Well, she's 20, she went away and she's back home doing online courses and isn't leaving the house. Well, she's leaving now to come see me, and really, like, very nice people, but very anxious, and this kid just has had such a sheltered life. She had no capacity to deal with roommate issues or being away from home, and so that's a kind of scenario that I'm seeing, more of the time. So even though there's so much more to say, I just want to point out that some of the things we can't really talk about, impulse control, self-discipline, that kind of goes with that. I'm a really big advocate of kids having to do household chores. And you cannot imagine how parents push back on me with that one. But I say, listen, just because they're busy with AP classes or whatever they're doing, it doesn't give them a pass. We're busy. So I think it teaches a level of responsibility, being part of a community, and actual tools and skills for their life. So, and responsibility goes along with that. Grit is really having a capacity to just keep going at something even though it's difficult. And again, there's a great book, Angela Duckworth, who is at Harvard, wrote a book on this, so that's on the list as well. And character strengths is really the development of character in the person, kindness, generosity, empathy. Again, I rarely hear people talking to me about that when they come to see me about the concerns they have for their 13 or 14-year-old. And I'm sure you all know this, if you're a good person and you have those strengths, you're going to also do pretty well in life. But we are not even thinking about that. It's like not on people's radar, which is alarming to me. So I guess we're all actually over. So we should open it up to questions. Yeah.
What is your hypothesis or thinking regarding why parenting has shifted so much, as you were describing, like the 1950s, and the parents focusing towards the child, saying, what are you going to do about this? Parents shifting to looking externally, like to other adults, the teacher, etc. What is your thinking on why that has shifted and what we need to do to get that back on track?
Right.
You have to repeat the question.
Oh yes, right. Do I just repeat it?
Repeat it.
So the question is, if in fact the parenting paradigm has shifted, which it has, like what are the reasons for that we're now in a situation where parents are looking towards the teacher or the guidance counselor or somebody else to fix the problem? Is that right? I think it's multi-determined, but about 20 years ago, some theory out there developed where it really was about we have to be just consciously paying attention to our kids' happiness and their self-esteem, and things just went really awry in that way. That's one factor. And the other factor is we're in a very competitive world. And so I think parents feel a lot of pressure when they're caught up in it. It's like being in the Matrix for anybody that watched that movie, but this is like a different Matrix. So it's very hard to not do the same thing that people around you are doing. So I think that's a factor, and I think that a lot of focus has shifted from the community to everybody being unique and special and very individualistic. And so being caught up in that, if there's like a race going on, I feel like everybody's in a race for their kid to be the best at something. So all of this combined puts a lot of pressure on parents and people. Nobody really knows, but those are just some of my thoughts about it.
So that idea of good enough is good enough would be a nice antidote to that?
Yes. And I think we talk the talk about we just want you to work to your potential. But what does that really mean? And I think people have to be very secure in themselves to have their children find their way in life. And You know, why is that less now than it used to be before? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that, you know, even my daughter is saying, Mom, what you're doing is really interesting. And I think you're right about a lot of it, but what am I going to do if my daughter decides that she wants to play soccer? Am I going to say, oh, you're not going to do that because that's going to require every weekend this family being away? I think they're very hard decisions to make. So there's been a huge shift. And when I grew up, the couple was the primary thing, and the kids, I mean, you know, we were important, but not like now. Now everything is about kids. I have one family, their kids are in, that I see are in ice hockey. I'm not kidding. They need an Excel spreadsheet to get through the weekend. I'm not kidding. So, you know, look at what we're taking away, but it takes a lot of, it's going to take almost like a revolution, I hate to say, to have this shift. Because the last talk we did, people came and said they really liked it and they appreciated what we had to say, but they felt like, how are they not going to do this with their kids? So I don't have the answer to that. That's why I don't think it's the end of the world that your kid is busy and doing all of this, but you have to have a bigger template when you think about what you're doing when you're parenting them. And empathy, by the way, which we didn't even have on there, but empathy is extremely important to work. We could have a whole talk on that. And that is becoming less in kids, which is really scary, actually. There's a guy that's been doing studies at, well, he's probably not the only one, but there's a university where they've been tracking in a freshman class of intro psych, so the kids get extra credit, for the last, I think, 20, 25 years. They give them the same questionnaire every year. It's a questionnaire that assesses narcissism, and you look at this thing, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. And empathy, which is really about seeing things from other people's perspective, is again very important to teach to your kids.
When you go through some of these pieces in that question, can you talk a little bit about social media in terms of the effect on things like empathy or how they perceive themselves as it relates to some of those things about emotional regulation and growth mindset? Because I find, one in college, one in junior, the social media to me has as much an effect on them as anything else. And if a parent, you don't try to regulate that or at least monitor it or watch over it or comment on it, you could lose your child very quickly.
I agree with you on that, though. And a lot of people come in looking for some kind of guidance about that. I had a patient come in this week where she had thought, I'm so not good at all that, but I think she had thought that Instagram was better than Snapchat, and so she agreed to that over the other. And then she found a study that said that, which is I think it's Instagram, that you can change the photos. You can do you know, get rid of blemishes, make yourself look slimmer, that whole thing. That there was a study done recently about how detrimental this is to young girls and their body image. So here's this mom who's actually done her research, made a really good decision and said, you're not going to do Snapchat, I mean, you're not going to do this, you can do this one, and then finds out, like, in the end, that has its problems too. So I think it's hard because it's a lot for parents to have to cope with and to be aware of. But yes, it's a very big problem. Even on the level of kids being able to be alone with themselves, my dissertation now 1,000 years ago was on the capacity to be alone and how that related to mental health and psychological adjustment, which my husband, who's a psychiatrist, always says I should go back and kind of explore that now. It's crazy how kids, like, I have to sometimes take the phones from adolescents who come in my office. I can't imagine, they really think that their parents are paying to have them come see me and they're going to be on their phone? And you can see the anxiety come up in them. And so a big part of the emotional regulation is people need ways of managing anxiety without avoidance. And a lot of people use a lot of things they may not intend that to be as avoidance. Gaming is becoming a huge problem. A very hard thing to treat as a therapist too. A kid that's truly addicted to gaming is very difficult to treat, actually.
Well, a comment. So the question was, how has electronics and social media affected this, all our components? And it's difficult to spit out an absolute answer, but from a parental view and from coaching kids and being around kids, I throw a lot of social parties, and I literally bring a basket And I said, okay, and I tell the parents ahead of time, there will be no social media. And I put all the phones in a basket. I actually put it on Facebook. Here I am, you know, no social media. And I got so many comments. And I had the kids have a scavenger hunt. And I know my own child is much kinder when she's not on her phone constantly. And then at dinner, we have no phones allowed. If people come over, the rules of our house, if we have to have a phone pile. And in my family, when we go out to dinner, extended family, we have to put the phone pile, and the first one to pick up the phone has to pick up the tab. So we make it kind of cute, but you know, I can't talk about the addiction to that, but we implement some rules as parents and socially, and the kids know it, and they still love to come to my house.
But then you also have to remember you're role modeling that yourself. You know, I go out to dinner and watch families where all 4 of them, or the airport actually, I notice it even more. Everybody is on a phone or an iPad in a family, so. Well, to be honest, like a few years ago, before we got involved with this, I got very interested in giving parents questionnaires, just inquiring about what they would like to say about their child at age 18 in terms of values. That's how I sort of launched into this. I didn't know where it was heading. And even that was kind of a little bit difficult to do. You know, like, I hear what you're saying, but that's so individual. And I personally think that it's sad to me, but it's very hard to even find resources online for value-based parenting without it being under the guise of an organized religion. And so that is complicated when you have so many people that's not part of their life right now.
Just to follow on, we're not talking about religion.
Right, I know, but
Talking
even
about spirituality,
right,
it's different.
right. But you know what that is. I know what that is. It might not even be the same, but that's still such an individual thing. You are going to have people that they're definitely not going to want the school to do that. But I know it's not the same.
So as we draw to the end, let me perhaps raise one more question for Dr. Morgan and Haytayan. Are we not, as a society and culture, addicted to success? Are we not addicting our children to success, and by extension, fearful of failure in any extent, whether it's academics, sports, relationships, materialism, having the best of everything, getting the best grades? And by doing that, are we not inducing this anxiety? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in all of those categories. It doesn't have to be academics. It could be in any walk of life, relationships with their friends, peers, and other people. Are we not addicted to success in America? Are we not addicted to these schedules that put an awful lot of stress on not only the parents, which by extension and simply by being close to the children, you have to do the sports. We have the schedule, as you have to have an Excel spreadsheet to be able to get through the weekend. What kind of stress are we putting on anxiety-inducing things that we're doing to young people for a couple of generations now? That's resulted in, well, you know, in my generation in Woodstock, it's the tune in and drop out syndrome. We've had enough.
So, to rephrase, so the question is, like, do we need to consider, you know, the fact that there's so much focus on success and the pressures that we're putting on our kids? I guess the only thing I'm going to say about that is that I think it's how you define what success is. Because I think that Martin Seligman, who's done so much work on resilience, his new book is called Flourish. And I like to think about what can we do to help our young people flourish, you know, and have them realize it's not all about all the things that you just said. Of course it isn't. But the more grounded they are in the people they are, and if they like who they are, really like who they are, and they realize that they're not just their grade point average or their SAT scores or whatever, then they're going to be in a much better place to deal with those pressures. Because realistically, that world isn't going to change very fast. So at the end, we still have to kind of prepare them, but kind of be able to have a different lens to look at this and have the courage to maybe stand up and say, you know what, that's not for me, and this is my path, you know. but yeah.
There's a book, and I don't know who it was by. I read just the first chapter, and it said 9 steps to raising a resilient child. And the first chapter is about empathy. And I'm a nurse, I'm a mom, I'm like, I've got this. I start reading the chapter, and I realize it says one of the key ways is to be empathetic to your child. And they are probably the least people I'm empathetic to, because I'm like, you know, clean this, do this, we have all these expectations of them, and I didn't always give them empathy about, you know, we're always holding them to higher and higher expectations instead of being empathetic.
Right. But that's so again, empathy being a very important factor, which it is, and I think so many times we get black and white about all of these things. It is important to be empathic to your child, but at the same time, the empathy, so it promotes compassion, which is a little different than empathy. It is a good trait to foster, but you also really want to help your child, and you're right, some of it's how you model it, but when they come to you and they're upset about whatever, it's not that we say to them, oh, you shouldn't be upset, you know, maybe your teacher was just having a bad day. You say, you are upset, what are your thoughts about maybe what happened today at school? Can you think of any other reason that the teacher did not call on you? So in terms of the resilience in what we can do with our kids, it's trying to walk them around the data from another perspective. And when you have a parent, which is happening often now, that just goes straight for, oh, well, you know what, that parent down the street, I know that, you know, they don't like our whole family because of whatever reason. And they come up with these ideas. It's very rigid thinking, and then that's the way your child will deal with things like that in the future.
Dr. Morgan, Ms. Haytayan, thank you so much for coming for Bedford BeBOLD's monthly speaker series. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts and information to all of us here. Just want to add a couple of things. Next month's speaker series is November 27th. I have a running thing with Representative Danielson on dates. It's November 27th right here, 7 p.m. It's going to be on vaping. We're going to have our two school resource officers, Spike Donahue and Danielle Nightingale, here to talk about vaping, explain what it is, what the dangers are, and we're also going to have a medical doc here as well to talk about the medical aspects of vaping as well. So again, join us on November 27th here, 7 p.m. at the Bedford Library. A couple thoughts. I know a lot of you are concerned about or interested to know about what's happening with school. As soon as I leave here, I have to go back. We're doing a safety assessment back at the PD with the command staff. We're going to determine how many roads are going to be closed tomorrow and whether or not that's going to impact school closure. I'll be talking with Superintendent McGee in a little bit about that. So look for some information coming out of the superintendent's office in a few hours about school tomorrow. Halloween may or may not happen. Again, it's contingent upon a safety assessment, how many roads are closed tomorrow, whether or not it's safe for kids to be walking around the neighborhoods. So we're going to make that assessment again in about 15 or 20 minutes. You'll get something out on Nixle on our website about that as well. Whenever we do have Halloween, make sure that you check your candy. Make sure that none of the children consume any candy until you take it home. Inspect the packaging, make sure that it's manufacturer sealed, that there's been no punctures or anything happening to it. And again, you may have been reading things about marijuana edibles. A lot of this stuff is designed to look like kids' candy. So again, be careful about manufacturers' labeling and packaging in containers when it comes to candy and Halloween. So thank you all for coming, and appreciate it, and have a great evening.